Bonjour à tous. Mon nom est Jim Gadvan et je suis président et chef de direction de CANARIE. J'aimerais remercier Michel et Ginette pour m'avoir donné l'occasion de m'adresser à vous ce matin. And I actually understood most of what, and I know there's a new logo, and I noticed that, and you'll see in our presentation that we don't have the new logo up yet. I apologize for that. The clicker is here, this way. So this, rather than talk to you about what's happening in CANARIE's current mandate or next mandate, and for those of you who are aware of CANARIE, we are funded by the federal government, and we go through a periodic renewal of our mandate, and I could talk for a very long time about that and where we are with that and how it aligns with what the government is doing. But I thought rather than talk about that, let's talk about something that's kind of a little bit more intriguing, and that is the future. So we are here at the 25th anniversary of RISQ, which is a fantastic achievement and a fantastic event, and I congratulate the organization on the success that it's had in the community. And I really love the presentation that just happened, as well as the one previous to that from Clement, in terms of talking about what was the world like 25 years before RISQ and projecting what it's going to be 25 years after. But the question that we always ask ourselves is, how good are we at predicting the future? And I would contend that we're really not all that good at predicting the future. I mean, even if you go back 25 years and you think about the internet as it was, and you think about 2,400 baud modems, and how many remember even the 300 baud modems where you put the phone into the device, and then imagining the World Wide Web as it is today and the dependency we have on it, then that, you know, probably the most interesting economic example is that we have an organization called Google that makes $50 billion a year helping people find stuff. It's just a staggering, and who could have predicted that? And if you could have predicted that, why didn't we do it, right? So that's a lot of money. But I have to say that there is an example of an organization that was really good at predicting the future, and that's the Jetsons. So for those of you who might remember this, and some of you would and others wouldn't, they predicted flat screen TVs, right? So this is a show from 1962, even before the 25 years before RISQ, and these are the things they predicted. They predicted wearable technology. They predicted functional robots. Right. And you can buy one of those today, apparently. This one's my favorite, though. This one's my favorite. All right. So, all that to say that this organization is capable of doing something that Niels Bohr once said, and for those of you, Niels Bohr, sort of the person who came up with the concept of the atom, said, prediction is difficult, especially if it's about the future. Right. We know, though, that the rate of technology adoption is accelerating. If you look at just over 100 years ago, or roughly about 100 years ago, the automobile was still moving into mainstream, and billions of cars were sold. And today, on an annual basis, it's about 800 million cars. A fairly substantial number, but it's taken quite a while. By contrast, some of this technology is adopted at a dizzying rate. For example, the Game Boy sold 118 million units, that thing at the bottom there, since 1989. Although I'm going to fast forward here, because, but you know, at the current end is we see the Google Glass. But if you just back up 2 steps, the iPhone, it absolutely transformed the way we operate. The example, I love the comment about going camping and sort of stranding your kids for a while. It's maybe a nice way to spend time with your children. But that thing is only has only been around since 2007, right? So in the space of roughly 7 years, we've seen a dramatic transformation in the way we communicate, the way we process information, and moreover, our expectations in terms of what the technology is going to enable for us. And there's really no end in sight in terms of where this is going. Just from a numerical perspective, the iPhone to date has sold roughly about 250 million units, right? And that's just the iPhone. I mean, the Android numbers I don't have, and the BlackBerry numbers are also there as well, and it just continues. The iPad itself, many of you have the iPad. That's only 4 years old, right? So the point here is what used to take multiple generations now takes considerably less. I mean, predicting where it's going to go is always a continual challenge. The question is, what else is coming at us? How many people have seen this picture before? It's a self-driving car. And there's some really cool YouTube videos, and if you want to spend a half a day just looking on YouTube, you'll find some experiences that people have when they're first in the car, and the notion of their hands not on the wheel, and the car is just taking them wherever they are. And then they take them through this high-speed track where, even if Mario Andretti was driving, you would be kind of pretty nervous. Well, okay, that really dated me, didn't it? Michael Schumacher. You would be sort of nervous, but this car is going through this track at an incredibly high speed without a driver. Now, I want you to sort of stop and think about a self-driving car, and what does it mean to you? For most of you, especially probably here in Montreal, you're thinking, well, this would be fantastic, right? Because I can just sit in the back and I'll be stuck in traffic, but I'll be able to catch up on my work, or it's going to reduce the incident of accidents, and the reality is going to be probably one that we can't predict. And the reason why we can't predict it is, I know Michel drives to work, and he has somebody's paying parking. It's a lovely parking garage, and they're digging another big hole there. But why? Why does his car have to be where he is? Why can't the car just drop him off and go park itself at some place cheaper? And then if you take that notion of that, you say, well, where else does it go? Well, I have the fortune of having 2 wonderful children. We have 4 cars, one per the children, each for the children, one for my wife. And I think, well, most of the time they're all parked. More than 90% of the time, actually 95% of the time, maybe even 99%, all 4 cars are parked. And yet we own 4 cars. Why would you want that? The car could just come and get you where it wanted and take. So what does that do to the economics of the automobile industry? What does that do to the taxi business? What does that do to everything else? And so you start to think about the social impacts of something like a self-driving car, and you start to push past the notion of I'm just sitting in the back of this thing and it's giving me a nice, comfortable ride, and I can try to level up on the game that I've been playing on or catch up on my email. And it really starts to make you think. Look, so the collaborations that are required to make this work are just phenomenal. I'll give you an example. You're sitting in the back of the car, okay, and the car is going down the road, and it encounters a groundhog. Everybody knows what a groundhog is, right? And the car now has to make a decision, right? Just like today, you make a decision. Do you swerve? Do you hit it? Because you know what? I hate those damn things anyway. Or do you hit the brake, right? And the car has to decide, if I hit the brake, do I risk injuring the person in the back? Is there a risk of a rear end, right? So the car's got to make some sort of ethical decision. Now, the good news is that the car behind you, if it's a self-driving car, will be aware of what your situation is. and somebody said this to me, and I'll repeat this, and just before it actually tweets out that your car's an a-hole for braking, it'll make the same decision. It knows that you're about to hit the brake, so it'll brake and it'll avoid hitting you. Now the question is, how does it know that? And what privacy information did you have to give up to have the car behind you aware of you in that car braking to avoid hitting a groundhog? And so you start to think about, the point of this is, you start to think about something as basic as this innovation called the self-driving car, and you move along a pathway that says, this is more than just about me sitting in the back of this car commuting to work. All these systems have to be analyzed and understood, and the level of collaboration goes all the way from a technical collaboration, and I'll come back to that, all the way towards understanding issues related to privacy and security. Here's another good example. Are we ready for this? Right, my brother had the good fortune of having a good surgeon, but the misfortune of having to need a surgeon yesterday to do heart surgery. And I could not imagine a world where this would be happening from a surgical perspective, and yet people talk about this all the time. And so, you know, the interesting thing about this picture here is the humanization. We don't want a robot to deal with us, and so we'll put a shirt on the robot, and we'll put a face on it, and just to make it feel like it's actually a human dealing with us. And so it really starts to think about how we're going, not only just from a technology perspective, but from a society perspective. And are we ready for this? We might not be ready for it, but our children might be. And if they're not ready for it, then maybe our grandchildren. This starts to get us a little closer to home in terms of the technology. So this is, I'm sure many of you are familiar because it's happening right in your backyard. This is a picture of the brain scan. How many people have heard about the Big Brain project? Show of hands, yes, no. So this represents, the Big Brain project is an international collaborative project between McGill and, if I recall, the Jülich Research Center in Germany. So it's an international collaboration. What they did was they took the human brain and they sliced it into 7,000 slices, right? And each slice at that level, so if you can imagine 7,000 slices, some of it's sort of about the same size as some of the neurons in your brain, right? It gives you this incredibly high resolution, essentially atlas of the brain, right? It's a true geography of the brain. The question is once you have this information and understand that level of detail, where is it going to take us in terms of our understanding of, you know, mental diseases like Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, autism, you name it. The question is, you know, what are we opening up with this technology in terms of where the future is going? This is also another mind-boggling thing. How could we have predicted? Did anybody predict Twitter? And how many people saw Twitter when it was out? I think it came out maybe about 10 years ago. Not even that. 5 years ago? 5 years ago? And when I first saw it, I don't know about you, I first saw it, I thought, like, what would I do? What would I do with this? Right? I took a picture, actually, by the way, of the fabulous risk team, and I was going to tweet that because it was great picture. But at first, when I saw it, I thought, well, like, why does anybody care what I'm having for dinner? Right? The best one was I saw a TV show, a guy named Stephen Colbert said, like, well, his first experience with Twitter was he would take out his thing and he would say, I am tweeting right now. True, not that useful, right? And yet, it has morphed how we communicate amongst ourselves. But that's not all, right? Crowdsourcing, the whole finance, right? financing ideas. Just who thinks of these things? And so somebody has an idea, and the technology just enables something to look like it just emerges. And yet there's a lot of work going into it and a lot of thought going into it. And you know, sometimes I wonder if I'm being manipulated because I've ended up in a space I didn't know how I got to. But that's constantly happening to us. Local to home, there's this ocean. We're blessed that we have this amazing coastline. We have Ocean Networks Canada out in the west coast, and they publish on their website. You can go on there and watch some of their sensors that they have in the inlet off the coast of British Columbia, and they post it to the world. And they were surprised when a teenager in Ukraine, I think it was about 2 years ago, was, you know, a citizen scientist just watching this thing, and he saw something that they'd never seen before, and that was a northern elephant seal at a depth they've never seen it. And the seal just comes into the frame, eats, like, I believe what was it they ate? Another fish of some kind, just disappeared and went, and they were like, holy moly, how would you have caught that without crowdsourcing and just having eyeballs at this? I could go on a tangent there around the inability of the technology to do things which is very simple for us to do, and I guess the promise that computers would be able to solve things that we thought were difficult are actually we thought were simple is much harder. I'll give you an example. So computers are really good at doing things like giving you the square root of some 2,000-digit number. They can figure that out, and it would take us almost forever to figure that out, and they do that. But what computers are really bad at is, you know, recognizing someone at any perspective, seeing what they look like today, comparing them to what they look like 25 years ago, and remembering, oh yeah, that was Michel Vanier or Clement, which was some really nice pictures. And so we end up in this delusional state where we think that we'll just throw more computing at it, and all of a sudden we'll have a cognitive, sapient being. But we have to understand that computers are fundamentally not good at doing certain things, and this is why crowdsourcing becomes important, because human eyeballs can look at something and make a decision much faster than a computer could. But there's also the human side of things, right? So we can throw technology at people, and it becomes very difficult to predict how they're going to react. A great example is, I mean, many of us, like we have devices and they make noises, and we don't like the noises they make, and we change them and we adapt ourselves to the technology. But we have back at CANARIE, one of the women that we work with has a car that has a backup sensor, and it'll tell her if she's going to back up into something. But she also has a garage that is below street level. And as she backs up the garage, the backup sensor is telling her that she's about to hit something. So what does she do? She ignores it, right? And yet this sensor would tell her, well, no, there's a bicycle there, or no, there's a child back there. But she says, well, you know, every day I'd back up, and wouldn't it be clever if the system was as clever as a human, and it would say, all right, so the normal behavior here is there's a ramp here, but there's something unusual, right? Which is really what she wants, right? And so the way the humans interact with the technology should be observed, because that's unpredictable, and then we should be thinking about how to evolve the technology to get the behaviors we want. It's not a very useful safety feature if you turn it off. And you turn it off because it's giving you spurious information. So where's it all coming from? It's coming from, well, the good news is coming from everywhere. The World Wide Web, which I love the picture of Mosaic 1.0, and that was truly, in my opinion, the most transformational piece of software that mankind has ever developed, because that really brought the internet to everybody. Right? Before that, imagine explaining to your brother or your sister or your aunt or your uncle, no, you have to type this and and then hit carriage return, and then eventually they'll give you another one line about, and then you might want to, it just doesn't work, right? As soon as you have a graphical interface, it becomes intuitive to so many people. Where did that come from? That came from CERN, Switzerland. So these are the people that give us the Large Hadron Collider. And what do they want? They want to collaborate. That's why they built it. They realized after they built it that this would be usable by the masses. BlackBerry from the University of Waterloo, and Stanford University is touted as probably one of the strongest research/commercial collaboration, and is a fine example. It's probably like, you have Stanford up here in terms of collaboration, and then number 2 is kind of there, and then number 3 is just slightly below. Waterloo does a fantastic job. They're cited a number of times. So what's our take on this? Well, first, I will give you a small plug about what CANARIE does. I told you I wasn't going to, but that was sort of maybe just to get your attention. What is CANARIE's role? CANARIE's role, we sit at the intersection of research, the commercialization, and the government policy. We're almost entirely funded by the federal government, and it gives us the ability to interact with these players in a way that's sort of unique in the country. And from that vantage point, we've crafted our vision for where we think Canada, and actually probably everyone wants to go, is ultimately we want the technology to enable research, collaboration, and innovation anytime. What that means is, those of us in this room here who are in the business of making technology should be trying to get it to the point where it's totally accessible to anyone at any point in time without actually being aware of the technology that they're using. So if you have an idea, and the idea strikes your fancy, and you happen to be sitting there with your device, maybe called an iPad or whatever, on your laptop, you should be able to just ask it a question that just pops into your head. I wonder if this correlates with that. Somewhere magically, a lot of data gets moved, crunched, and then an answer is rendered on that device. And that's what we're striving to. If you look at all of our programs and our initiatives, they're all around supporting the realization of this vision. To do that, we have to collaborate like anyone else. We're not in the business of doing this ourselves. We're only an organization of 30 people, so so it's kind of hard to imagine that we could continue to drive towards this vision without the help of partners. We also believe in the notion of starting small, learning and building from that. And we also go after global opportunities as they make sense to leverage to amplify the effects in Canada. So I'll give you an example. In great partnerships, and this is where I have to apologize. I think I have the old logo here, Michelle. But then so did Nancy. I noticed that in your presentation, Nancy. And are you selling T-shirts, by the way? Yours is for sale? Okay. Okay. I'm going to start an auction here. Who wants a T-shirt? I've got Nancy's. I can sell it right now. $10. $10. I'm happy to have it. Actually, it's I love the new logo, by the way. But this is the Canadian landscape in terms of the research and education network. CANARIE does not operate the National Research and Education Network in Canada exclusively. We have a whole host of partners in province and territory. RISQ is here in Quebec. And if you think about CANARIE, our role is largely interprovincial and international connectivity, which shows you what the international perspective looks like. So it's through global partnerships that we connect Canada to the rest of the world. You may have seen, if you follow CANARIE at all, and if you don't, shame on you, that we just announced this week that we have a 100 gig redundant connection now in the North Atlantic to support a reliable connection to Europe. If you want, I can send you a soft copy of that for the price of a T-shirt. In research software, which is an area that is very near and dear to us, I want to make sure I don't go over time because I'd like to have some opportunity for questions. But in the research software, it's an area that CANARIE started investing in back in 2007. This was really a recognition of the enablement that software has in terms of bringing it to anyone, right? So, you know, for those of us who are really, really technically savvy way out there, we know how to, and I'm saying we, but I'm not one of these we, but the people that are out there know how to configure a high-performance computer to do some serious number crunching. And that's a very small set of people. And yet, a lot of research is dependent on clustering of computers. And so software is what actually makes that technology accessible to more people. In this mandate, what we've done is we've continued the program. And I'm proud to say that some of the programs we support are local programs. In McGill, for example, we have two initiatives. One is the Brain browser, which took some work that was done in the past mandate and made that work accessible to other platforms. So now that software is actually being used, for example, by people on the West Coast for visualization of astronomical data or getting access to high-performance computing. The same is GenApp. How many are familiar with the GenApp, the genomics platform in Shell? So this is a platform to have better accessibility to genomic data no matter where it is and provide access to, even though they're fairly sophisticated, these people that look at these things, again, they don't know how to handle high-performance computing. And so GenApp is a key application there. We also support the private sector through a partnership with Calcul Canada / Calcul Quebec and some resources in University of Sherbrooke as well as ones in Alberta. We operate a service called DARE, and that supports the private sector by providing them cloud computing resources. And we're proud to say that we started this quite some time ago and started to partner with a number of incubators, accelerators, supporting things like Funding, which provides funding for really clever ideas. And it's through that initiative, we've provided support for over 300 small companies in Canada to help them adopt cloud technologies to develop next generation products and services. This one's a very exciting one. This is a national initiative called CENGEN. How many people have heard about this? Probably very few. Michel would have because he's on our board. So this is a National Center of Excellence for Next Generation Networks. This Center of Excellence was just granted by the federal government, $11.7 million over 5 years, and its sole purpose is to try to claw back some of the market share that Canada has lost over the years, you know, with the demise of Nortel and possibly BlackBerry, although, you know, they're not dead yet. I love that line from the Monty Python and the Holy Grail, right? I'm not dead yet. He's feeling better. And it's some serious partnerships here in making this happen, right? And CANARIE is seen as a very critical asset as well as the rest of the NREN because these companies need to collaborate amongst themselves, and so we would support the RISC network bringing these organizations that are in Quebec, for example, Expo, I believe, has headquarters here in Montreal, and hopefully Ericsson, and allow them to collaborate with SMEs no matter where they happen to be, or researchers wherever they happen to be in Canada, as well as other multinationals. The genomics one, I'll come back to that. I talked about that briefly. Everybody, I love to talk about genomics, and I love to talk about it because it's something that we all can relate to, right? Everybody has some DNA. Everybody knows about the value of DNA, and unfortunately, I think in some respects we may have unlocked the Pandora's box, right? Because as we understand more, we might want to experiment more. So imagine a world. Whereby, and I've had this described to me, and I thought, my God, this is mind-boggling. There's actually software now, believe it or not, that will create DNA. Okay? So, and then you take that DNA and you feed it what? Sugar. And what does it do? It creates whatever that DNA is. Okay. What do we do with that? Well, besides the movie Jurassic Park, which scared the heck out of me, I didn't watch the sequel, honest, and I hid in the back, especially with that raptor. But anyway, imagine a paradigm where you're ill, and you go see your doctor, and the doctor says, oh, okay, Nancy, I'll take your DNA, come back in 2 days, and here's a pill that I've created just for you. And it's a virus that has been created that will bond exactly to the cell structure that's for you. Don't give it to anyone else, it's just for you. So that changes the entire model for the pharmaceutical model. It increases the yield in terms of the research that they can do. So, many of the problems they have is that they'll create a drug and it'll work on 20% of the population and as opposed to 80% of the population, and they'll say, well, that's not worth bringing to market, and yet those 20% are not benefiting, or the risk is too high and we don't know how to filter. So imagine that specificity that you get when you have software that can create a virus in your doctor's office. And that's where the technology could be heading. And people look at me and they think, well, that's not as scary. Why would we want that? Well, we're humans, and if we have an option of doing something, somebody will do it. People do all kinds of crazy things. So that, and then there's a lot of other good news stories about what DNA and the genomic space happens. But in terms of the collaborative parts of this problem, so in Quebec, we have specific health laws. Those laws are different than the laws in Ontario. They're different than the laws in Manitoba and everywhere else. And not only the security law is different, but the state of which digital health records have started to make the scene is different across. So you take Canada and you have this incredible mosaic in terms of all these things with respect to ethics, with respect to privacy, and so on. And these are problems we all have to solve if we want the promise of DNA. And I'll tell you why that's true, because without clinical data, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros, right? Like you look at a DNA sequence and you say, that's nice, it's a bunch of ones and zeros. But if you don't know that that's a 55-year-old male of Lebanese descent who has had this issue, that issue, and that issue, you can't make any correlations to anything else you might see. So at some point, we have to give up some information to get this benefit. And that's actually happening as well. So what are the global requirements in terms of this collaborative problem? Because the number that apparently I read this article that said the number of sequences we need to have a meaningful conclusion is 35,000. So that's a long line of people coming into your center, right? Well, why would you do that when you can just share the data? Because I might be interested in looking at, for example, pancreatic cancer, but your data, you might be interested in something else, and I can just share my data and you can draw your conclusions. Last, I think I'm gonna finish on time. What time am I supposed to finish? 5 minutes ago? All right. I'll go quickly here. Just come back to the cars, because this is a technology conference. And so I'm just going to talk quickly about the technology that's actually needed to bring it to these cars. And I want to really do this to make the point that each of these technologies that you see here, what makes a self-driving car work? Well, the car needs to know where it is. So you need GPS. The car needs to kind of have a rough idea of what the terrain looks like. So it needs a map. It also needs a high-speed network and a high-speed computer. It also needs maybe some dedicated lanes for field trial. It might also need all the sensors. All of these things, in fact, none of these things were initially put together for the purpose of creating a self-driving car. Moreover, each of those things started with something that wasn't there to start whatever it did. The GPS system is an example. The first satellites went up. They didn't go up for the purposes of building GPS. They're most likely to spy on each other, but and then television. And then they thought, well, actually, let's put some up there for the GPS. And this just continues, like, as the technology continues to evolve. I love these Smarties. And so you end up with what looks like a very, very kind of diffused starting point that gets you into a future where you have something that is offering value that you couldn't imagine. And our tagline on this is clearly the collaboration drives fusion from diffusion. And it's only because we can figure out how to work together to ultimately take all of these piece parts and create something that we didn't imagine 25 years ago. So I'm hoping I gave you the sense that it's very difficult for us to predict where this is going, and we need to continue the collaboration, not just locally, not just nationally, but internationally. Not to suggest that any one layer is redundant. They're all very essential. But it's still kind of hard to predict the future, and I would say that maybe we should maybe they have the answer. And there's supposed to be music here, but there's no music. So I'll sing. Jane, his wife. So I'll make my closing comments in French, if I may. Je vous remercie pour l'attention que vous m'avez consacrée. À présent, il me ferait plaisir de répondre à vos questions s'il nous reste du temps. Thank you very much.